Hi guys! So today I'm going to tell you about Tristan's birth story. It didn't really go according to plan or according to my birth plan. So my waters broke on the Sunday night, Monday morning in the middle of the night. It wasn't an obvious break, so I didn't really kind of twig that that was my waters breaking. What it felt like was I had to go to the bathroom a lot. And obviously when you're that far on pregnant, I was nine days overdue by then. When you're that pregnant, you do have quite a weak bladder, so I just assumed it was I needed to go to the toilet a lot. This carried on throughout the day of the Monday, while my partner Ewan was at work. I was almost in denial. I didn't want to believe that that was my waters breaking. It just felt like, again, I had a weak bladder. That's what I assumed it was. But the more it carried on throughout the day, the more I was more convinced it was my waters breaking. Ewan had come home from work about 5:30, 6 o'clock. We didn't phone the hospital until about 11 o'clock that night, and we were advised to go down to the hospital to get checked over. Originally I wanted a water birth. When we got to the hospital that wasn't possible. Unfortunately there was another lady in the water birth room. The hospital itself only had one pool, and I knew that was always a possibility that even though I had my heart set on it, I wouldn't be able to have it if somebody else was using it at the time. I also wanted the birth to be as natural as possible. So with as little pain relief as I possibly could, and trying to breathe through every contraction. When I was actually giving birth, the one thing I focused on was strangely counting down from 40 seemed to get me through each contraction, and I was focusing on breathing very, very heavily. As the contractions progressed and I was getting more tired, I ended up speaking to the midwife, who recommended that I used Meptid, which she advised on the basis of it's not as strong as pethidine or diamorphine, and as I wanted as natural birth as possible, this was probably the best option to start with. So what that did is it just took the edge off it. So I carried on with the contractions and got to 10 centimetres dilated. I was there for quite a while, and the consultant ended up coming in. She recommended I carried on pushing for another hour. Unfortunately, she advised that my pelvis was possibly too small for Tristan to come out, and the way she put it was, even if I pushed for another 5 more hours, he wasn't going to be moving. She advised on a forceps delivery, to which my first worry was, I don't want an epidural. I'd heard too many horror stories about an epidural, and it's not really where I wanted to go. She mentioned to me that if the forceps delivery didn't work, then I'd have to go into a C-section, which would mean having an epidural anyway, and as much as a local anaesthetic would take the pain off, an epidural is going to be much more successful. So I thought about it for a few minutes, and it seemed the most sensible option, so that's the one I took. Sorry, I've had to just pick him up out of his bed. He was getting a bit restless. It's almost tea time. So I was taken into surgery to have a forceps delivery. The epidural's a really funny thing in that you can see your legs but you can't feel them or move them. So Tristan ended up being born by forceps delivery at 2:30. I ended up having a 3rd-degree tear and also 2 cuts, which when I was pregnant it was something I'd looked into before, and I was quite scared of being cut or tearing during the birth. But to be honest, with the epidural you can't feel anything at all, so it wasn't something I was aware of at the time. So he was taken over to a table where they checked him over. They gave him his vitamin K injection, and my partner Ewan actually cut his cord. The buzz in the whole room was amazing. Myself and Ewan were completely in tears, totally overwhelmed with the whole situation. So I was stitched up and we were taken onto the ward. During the Tuesday, Tristan had bloods taken. As my waters are broken quite early on in comparison to when he was born, there's a chance that they might have an infection, which it ended up being he did have an infection, and we had to stay in hospital for 6 days while he was on antibiotics twice a day. It ended up being quite claustrophobic, but plus side we had our own room, which was quite good as I had the medical support there for the first few days after him being born, which after having a forceps delivery is quite a reassuring thing. But at the same time you do just want to be at home starting up your new family. Finally, after 6 days, we ended up going home. Tristan's doing really well, and I'm seeing the physio now, but otherwise I'm doing really well. I've healed really well. In comparison to what I thought it would be like, I thought I'd be waddling for weeks on end. I thought I wouldn't heal very quickly, and it's completely changed my opinion on the whole thing. With regards to possibly having children in the future, it hasn't put me off that. I always thought that having a birth that didn't go to plan, or was quite gruesome in the end, would really put me off having children, but no, I'd definitely do it again. So I'd like to hear all your birth stories if you have any. if you've had a forceps delivery, if you had a birth plan that was completely different to how the actual birth went on, if you had a natural birth with no problems at all. So just leave your stories in the comment box below, and I look forward to reading them. So looking back on my footage, I've just realised you guys can't actually see Tristan, and it just looks like I'm looking at my own leg. So and I'm wearing my glasses. I'm totally new to this thing.